Hello, Recaps Mystery here. Today, I'm going to explain an action, thriller, film, in hell. Watch out and take care. Kyle LeBlanc, an American foreign worker, works in a steel plant in Magnitogorsk, Russia. After his wife complains about him not giving her enough attention, he decides to pay her a visit during his vacation. While driving home, he calls her to notify her of his visit, but instead hears her screaming as Sergio Kovac abuses her and stabs her when she fights. Kyle goes home to assist her but discovers her dead body. As Kovac flees the house, both are taken to the police station after he tracks him down, but Kovac uses his power to buy the judge, who deems him innocent in the case owing to a lack of evidence. Enraged by this unjust ruling, Kyle steals a gun from one of the guards and shoots Kovac many times in the courtroom. As a result of this crime, he is condemned to life in jail without the possibility of parole. He is transferred to Kravai jail, where the warden, General Hruskov, punishes an inmate in front of the newcomers to send a message that if they ever try to escape, they may meet similar penalties. Kyle is beaten up by an officer, Lieutenant Tillich, when submitting his possessions because he refuses to hand over his wedding band, which Tillich violently removes. Another American detainee, Billy Cooper, is taken to a cell at night and tortured and raped by a gangster, Andre, who has bribed the officers to fulfill his demands. The following morning, Billy is brought to the infirmary, but Andre walks quietly out of the jail. Andre begins a fight with Kyle after teasing him in the same way his wife's killer did, only to be halted by the officers, who put him away in solitary confinement. He chooses to embark on a hunger strike and attempts suicide after becoming tired of spending time in the filthy confinement cell. He gets frequent flashbacks of his departed wife, which drives him to survive, and he gradually starts eating the food that is brought to him. Soon after, he is dragged out and moved to a cell with inmate 451, who is known to have murdered his former cellmates. Officer Tillich encourages Kyle to be careful and offers to swap his cell in return for money when he arrives, but Kyle refuses. Kyle is terrified of his cellmate because of his horrible reputation, but he doesn't say anything to him. After a few days, his brother-in-law pays him a visit and assures him that he is working to get him out, but asks him to pay the guards to make his life easier in the interim. Kyle subsequently encounters Billy in the jail yard, who informs him that he has been sentenced to 1.5 years in prison for driving while high and ramming his car into a restaurant. Malachi, another wheelchair-bound inmate, joins in and explains how things work in Kravai. He says that Andre is a Russian mafia member who gives the guards enough money to have things done his way and heads a group within the prison. During the meeting, Malachi also informs them of his power and invites them to contact him if they have any questions. Kyle begins to settle down, but Andre repeatedly teases him and provokes him to fight. After his cellmate 451 scares him by attempting to choke him, he pays a guard and begs that his cell be changed, but he asks him to wait or up the price. After a few days, a massive battle breaks out in the prison. Malachi informs them that it is General Hruskov who arranges these battles and gambles by betting on the fighters. Andre is known as Kravai's best fighter since he never loses a bout and always brutally beats his opponents. Kyle asks Malachi while watching the fight if his cellmate ever participates in these fights, but he is told that he declined years ago. Although the officers disagree with his decision, they are unable to punish him because they make a lot of money by putting other inmates in his cell and then accommodating their demands to shift. After a few days, Billy is carried back to Andre's cell, where he attempts to harm him but is assaulted instead, and is rushed back to the infirmary. Kyle is beaten up by gang members while working with other prisoners after unwittingly offending them. They informed the officer that Kyle attempted to disrespect them, and he permits them to exact their vengeance, resulting in his getting severely beaten by them. Kyle is transferred to a solitary cell once more, where he hears another inmate in the next room and attempts to converse with him through the wall. Time passes, and he becomes influenced by observing the savagery in the prison, where gangs pick battles with one another and kill other inmates over trivial disputes. While at labor, as the guards are hit by a mine, Billy decides to take advantage of the situation and attempts to escape with another convict, who is shot, and Billy is returned to the prison. Meanwhile, after Kyle is taken to solitary confinement for the second time, he begins working on himself and building his strength to endure, but his cellmate is concerned that Kyle is losing his genuine nature. Kyle battles against Andre, who swiftly starts beating him up as another fight is set up. Soon after, Kyle surprises everyone by making a surprise return and savagely biting Andre in the neck, killing him, while his cellmate watches in shock. This first battle proves to be a watershed moment, as he goes on a winning streak, earning him a lot of respect from the inmates. As he becomes more violent in his bouts and frequently kills his opponents, his well-wishers Malachi and Billy get concerned about his altered behavior. When he returns to his cell, inmate 451, who is worried about him, says, "Do you even know who you are?" but recognizes he has gone too far to return. Kyle forbids his brother-in-law from trying to get him out the next time he visits because he believes nothing will change and does not want to give false optimism. During the Russian Independence Day festivities, Malachi encourages Billy to flee, but in exchange for medicine, he confesses his plot to the guards. Billy is taken to another cell after being tortured by the officers, where he is raped and tormented to death by a new convict named Valia, who rapes and tortures him to death after Billy spits on his face. Kyle notices a seriously injured Billy in the cell and goes to his aid, but he succumbs to his injuries after telling him, "Don't let them transform you into someone you aren't." Billy's body is secretly buried in the dirt, as are the bodies of many other unlucky inmates who died as a result of Kiravi's heinous tortures. Kyle, moved by his advice, stands up for himself, refuses to struggle any longer, and is hanged outside for all to see as a punishment. He encounters difficult weather conditions, yet he does not give up and refuses to play their dishonest games. Meanwhile, 451, who has discovered Malachi's betrayal of Billy, decides to punish him by pouring a flammable substance all over his body and setting fire to him. This fire reminds him of the day when he was abused by his teacher, but he exacted his retribution, just like he did with Malachi. Other inmates are inspired by Kyle's persistence and guts to speak up for themselves. Rival gangs settle their differences and band together, refusing to fight each other. Because each of them refuses to participate in the game, the cops are powerless to penalize them all. General Ruskov and his other commanders are frustrated by the situation because they used to make a lot of money by betting on battles. After holding Kyle accountable for their rebellion, they intend to get rid of him to calm things down. Kyle is released from detention and transferred to the infirmary, where he recalls his wife Grace, who expresses her joy at his return. She assures him that nobody is ever gone, as long as there is someone to remember them. As he complains about missing her, Lieutenant Tillich, enraged by his actions, brings in the most dangerous prisoner, Milik, and orders him to fight Kyle. Kyle bangs on the wall throughout the fight, just like he did in captivity, which causes Milik to recognize him because he was the only one who ever tried to connect with him. He promptly puts an end to the conflict and befriends Kyle. The lieutenant is irritated by the situation and points a gun at them, demanding them to fight, but Kyle and Milik assault him instead. This sparks a riot as the convicts begin to protest the guards and break out of their cells. The cop shoots Milik several times, but he still manages to kill him. As the inmates begin to damage the premises, Kyle turns to Milik and attempts to console him, but he dies as a result of his injuries. Soon after, the guards seize control of the situation by calling in reinforcements, forcing the convicts to retire to their cells. As Kyle and his cellmate sit there disappointed, he tells him about his wife's murder and explains that when he lost himself, he also lost her, but he does not want to make the same mistake again. When 451 notices his frustration, he discloses that he can assist him in escaping. When he returns to their cell, he hands him some documents containing proof of all the killings and corruption that have occurred there over the last 20 years, and says that his plan involves one final fight. Although Kyle does not want to do it again, he caves because it is his only way out. Meanwhile, 451 reports that 7 inmates and a guard were killed in rioting, but it was nevertheless a success for them since, for the first time, they stood up for their rights rather than battling each other. When Kyle accepts to partake in another fight, General Ruskov considers it a success because it allows him to kill Kyle and get rid of him forever. Kyle puts up another strong fight against Valia the next day, dislocating his shoulder. As a response, Valia tries to attack him with a pocket knife, but it hits another gang boss instead, as Kyle slams Valia against a pole, stating it's for Billy. The officers want to take him out of the prison to shoot him, as 451 informed him. Meanwhile, he slips into the garage via a secret tunnel and attacks the guards in order to save Kyle. Kyle takes his ring back and crushes him with the car after obtaining the keys from the guard and freeing his restraints. On 451's recommendation, he changes into the guard's clothing and asks him to accompany him, but he refuses to go and passes him the documents, requesting him to ensure that the rest of the world is aware of this location. As Kyle prepares to depart in the guard's car, 451 returns to the general's office and murders him in retaliation for his misdeeds. The guards quickly find him and take him back to his cell, while Kyle successfully escapes. When he returns to the United States, he releases the documents, which leads to the closing of the Kravai prison after 3 months. The end. Please subscribe to assist the channel, turn on notification and leave a like. Thank you for taking the time to watch. See you again soon.